Walk with me as we discover an early pioneer family that today has passed by, but their imprint on the land and with locals is still very much alive today. Today, the Appalachian history detectives explore the hollows and haunts of an early explorer family to determine their life story. It is a story written in adventure travel, fighting for the formation of a new nation, toiling the land, and contributing to the American story. The time period was the early 18th century, and notably 1731, when George and his wife Maria Kale left all they had. Their established relationships, for reasons not entirely known, set sail for the New World on the British ship Britannia. We can surmise that word had reached them in Germany of the fertility of the land, and William Penn, who marketed his land grant throughout Europe, had already an established colony and had friendly relationships with the Native American Indians in Pennsylvania. Germany in the 16 and 1700s was a loose confederation of nation-states and not the unified country we see today. Fertile farmland there was already tied up by wealthy aristocrats and nearly impossible to obtain. George, hearing of the availability of cheap and fertile ground, no doubt felt that it was worth leaving all he had known and setting off for the wilds of the unknown. This period of time, the 18th century, would see unprecedented growth of German immigration into the United States, with the vast majority of those settling on the western frontier of Pennsylvania and now Berks and Lancaster counties. Today's Amish are descendants of those immigrants and still today hold on to the traditions and religious customs of that time period. George and Maria would arrive in Philadelphia and settle in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. George was already in his 50s when he made this trip and relatively late in his life to take up homesteading on the western frontier of early America. The German immigrants were known by outsiders as Deutsch and sometimes were confused as Dutch immigrants. They brought with them high skill sets in stone cutting and blacksmithing. Many of the stone structures built in that time period are still standing today up and down the Potomac and Rappahannock River valleys. After only 7 years in America, on April 4th, 1738, George would pass away. Hans Jurg, who also went by the name of George, and one of George's sons, and his wife Elizabeth, whose maiden name was Pugh, ventured further west and south, following his father's death to the Potomac River watershed along the Capon River, about 4 miles south of present Capon Bridge. It was during this time, in 1746, that Lord Fairfax, in order to settle a dispute with the Virginia Privy Council, had his 5 million acre land holdings surveyed. The Fairfax stone was placed to mark the western boundary of his land holdings, and also as the location of the beginning of the Potomac River. This survey was conducted by Thomas Jefferson's father, Peter Jefferson, and the famed Thomas Lewis of Merriwell Lewis fame. Lord Fairfax could not stem the flow of pioneers who were crossing the mountains, settling on his land, and saw this as a business opportunity and commissioned smaller survey tracts west of the Blue Ridge. George Washington, who lived just miles from Lord Fairfax, and still a teen, would be part of the survey team to lay out surveys to sell. This would make George Washington a wealthy man, as he often took payment in land himself and would collect for surveys on his own land holdings. George would become a farmer to his new land, but was interrupted by the Revolutionary War that would also draw him in. George would serve in the 8th Virginia Regiment in Captain William Croghan's company under the command of Colonel Abraham Bowman from January 1st to March 30th, 1777. Hans George would go on to live and farm his land until his death in 1797. and is buried with his wife and members of his family in the Kale family cemetery. His eldest son Peter would expand the family's land holdings in 1802, purchased an additional 602 acres adjoining his father's land. By 1816, for reasons unknown, Peter Kale would move his family to the more fertile lands of Midwest Ohio. Today, the original Kale farm land holdings, the Kale Cemetery, Kale Hollow, and Kale Ford, are still in the hands of the current owner. Join me as we discover the finds behind the story. Today I'm out here on a detection. I honestly do not know if where I'm going to be looking at. Let me pan over here. I'm going to be looking here. Beyond here it looks like might be a cellar, but I'm not 100% sure. And there's a nice flat area right up here, which also could have some potential. And I'm just going to pan here because right over here on this knoll is the Kale Cemetery, and this cemetery is probably one of the oldest family cemeteries in the county. 1815 is the latest, and I'm not sure if this is going to be the first or the last detection I do on this piece of property. I want to try this parcel out right here, and I've got another place down here through the trees here. There's an old barn, and there was a large two-story pioneer cabin down there, and so I'm going to try that out as well. So I appreciate you all joining me today. I hope we find some exciting and interesting finds, and it's a great day to be out doing some detections. Okay, I believe I am hitting some iron here. I've got some high tones, and I got some mid tones, and I got some low tones, and it's good and bad. Honestly, I'm looking for anything right now to let me know if I'm even hitting into an area that's been occupied or where there could have been an old pioneer cabin. So right now I'm digging up, even if it's a square nail or horseshoe or some iron implement, I'm looking at what it could be. I've been digging down here. There definitely was a building there. I can't determine if it was a barn, a shed, an outbuilding, or an actual house, but there's a lot of iron in the ground, and I've dug several square nails. Now I don't go digging after this stuff because I already suspect that it's probably an outbuilding, and there's the potential for a lot of nails there. And I My AT Pro was going off crazy with the iron readings all over the map. So anyway, I'm gonna do this one. I'm gonna record this one, and let's see what we get. I'm going to live dig this hole here. I found that button just right up there, about 30 feet or so. The reading that I'm getting here at where my shovel is about 77 to 80. Don't know. Typically that could be aluminum pop top, but it could also be a silver coin because they all have readings in that level. So I'm going to go ahead and do a live dig. Let's see what we find. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. It's either a big button or it's an old coin. Here's where it is. It's a copper coin. Pull it up here where you can see it. Tell you what, I'm going to have to clean this up and I'll show you what it is. Okay, I had a iron reading. It was a higher iron reading, and I found that coin just right there, about 2 foot away. But I started digging this out here, and I came upon this knife. Now it looks like it's broken off, but I'll take it. That's a great find. I suspect an old log cabin, or it could have been just a small shed type building. It wasn't that big. The area, the imprint of the foundation wasn't that big. I do think that it was a house site though. I wanted to wrap up what I have found and give you some dates. So here is what we found at the site, and of course I hit a number of square nails, which is typical for that time period. There was some pottery at the site, but I only brought one little piece, and this is very, very small. And I think this is probably from a teacup. Now this is an interesting find. This is silver. It actually reads silver on the metal detector. And it actually is a silver D, what they call a D style buckle. Now the responses that I received are 1800 up till 1900. This style of buckle was in use that was silver. So I found these two small round ball lead bullets. Now, I found all this near the same, it was all in the same area. This coin, you can't see it very well, and I apologize. You could see it better when I first dug it up. It is a half cent. But this button here is a treble best, which is a common button during that time period. The date on this, I put this to a actual button expert. Sent him photographs of it online, and he came back and told me this dates from around 1810 to 1840. And it's got flowers on it, and it does have a design on there. I don't know if you can fully see that or not. But this is a good find. This button is older. It's thinner. It lacks a maker's mark on the back. Button expert said that this dates from the 1700s. So this is an older button. And I found this button about 15 feet away from this coin. Now, I found this knife also in that area. And, you know, this is an iron. I would say this is an iron knife. I don't know. You know, obviously it's got pieces broken off of it. And, you know, this here I also found not very far away from the knife. And all I can think that this was used for is horse tack. And the same with this. I mean, this is horse tack as well. But I'd say that this is just an iron piece of horse tack. I'll get to this later. I also found these pieces here. You know, I don't think this here is as old. And I found this probably about 150 yards away from all of this. So this to me, I think this is probably more mid-1800s. Sure. I think it went to a stove, maybe a small stove. I don't know. These three pieces here, you have this edge on it. So to me, this set down into something. Okay, I think this was the top of a pot. And maybe a bean pot, or maybe a cook pot. But you can see that these three pieces all go to this. So I think it was a pot. And this here, I think the handle was up here. So I think this came out further and there was a handle on this. Now this is a little interesting. I did not find this at this site. Not where I found this stuff. I found it about 200 yards away from this site, near the graveyard. It is a Lone Ranger deputy badge. But actually, I posted it online and I got a lot of feedback on it. And everyone seemed to think that this was a real treasure. It's a Lone Ranger deputy's badge from the 1950s. And it actually is vintage and a collector's item. And it actually is worth quite a bit. I was really shocked. So now I'm happy I found this. And I probably will clean it up and display it. My overall evaluation of that site is I believe that there was a cabin there. And I believe that cabin was a homestead cabin. I believe that cabin was probably dating anywhere from the late 1700s to early 1800s, which would correspond to the dates of those gravestones when people actually lived there. There is another cabin on site. It's no longer there, but I have pictures of it. And I know that that cabin was there into the 1800s, even later 1800s, because there's a photograph of it. And that cabin is probably about 500 yards away from this site. And what I think is the first cabin is where they started. They moved everything out of there when they got the bigger cabin built as their family size increased. Or the cabin was a small cabin The family, one of the families that occupied it, moved on because that was real common. It could be someone else's cabin, but it's on the same property, and it's about 150 yards away from that cemetery. But I'm excited over these finds. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the dig. Thank you very much.